to the Falconcast, live from Coach's Pub in Midtown. It's a Thursday. What a great week of sports we had last week. I think we're going to have a great week of sport this week. And then, I have to admit, I'm going to start getting depressed because college football is over. But the cool thing is college basketball is going to kick in. And I'm not going to call him a guest. I mean, AJ is part of the Falconcast, and he's here every Thursday. He's a goddamn basketball savant. And so we'll do a lot of that. But we still got NFL left for one more week and one more game and a lot to recap from the weekend. So AJ Hoffman joins me. And, I'm just going to skip all the intro shit because.
That's all right. Most people know me.
Yeah, they do. And when AJ's here, I just want to get into it because we have so much fun doing this. Interesting. Let's start with college football because for all the people who were like, oh, I want Florida State, I want this, we've never had two semifinals go down to the last play.
No, it was incredible. But if you didn't enjoy those games, then you don't like football. Some of it was mismanagement. I would say Kalen DeBoer, had Washington lost that game, Kalen DeBoer was going to be in some trouble, man. Had they blown that because he made a couple calls that were
stupid.
That's a good way to. It's a nice way to put it. But Michigan, Alabama was just a great game, back and forth, and really came down to one mistake by Alabama when they fumbled that ball. Alabama had taken control of the game, and they took the lead, got a 3-and-out, and then Milroe fumbled, and all the momentum that they had was gone. I was on Alabama and the under. So I was feeling really great.
You got snaked in overtime. Yeah. Oh, ouch.
Caught overtime. I was like, oh, this is going to happen, isn't it? So kind of a tough beat there. But and overall, it was still a fantastic game. I'm still not sure who the better team is. If those teams play 10 times, it might be 5-5. I think in the Texas-Washington game, the right team won. Washington outplayed them for the most part. Texas their secondary is just not good enough right now. And you've got this front that's just amazing and takes away the run. It's almost like Georgia's first national championship where it's like teams just don't even try. What's the point? You're not running on these guys. And there was a couple times Washington ran right into the teeth of it. I was like, what are you doing? What?
Yeah.
How is that your call? But in the long run, the secondary was weak, and the truth is Michael Penix was just phenomenal. And he's got 3 NFL level wide receivers, and he was hitting spots that NFL, not just NFL quarterbacks, but high end NFL quarterbacks hit. And the Texas didn't have an answer for it. Texas offense started out a little bit clunky. They started to put together some stuff late, and like I said, had a chance at the end. Another mismanagement, though, Steve Sarkisian. I think that first down play call is just inexcusable. And I shouldn't blame Sark for that. I think that was a Quinn Ewers thing.
Right.
But for Quinn Ewers, that's inexcusable. You had 2 1-on-1s at the top. That's what you're looking for. If you don't feel good about either of them, you just chuck the ball out of the back of the end zone. That's the move. Instead, he threw off to the sideline, and it just burned a bunch of clock. It was a play that never had a chance. You've got to take 4 shots at the end zone there. From the 12, you're not getting another first down with the time that was left. You had time to take 4 shots at the end zone. You burned one of them. Another was an uncatchable pass. And then on 4th down, if that ball's thrown 9 inches lower, we might be talking a whole different story here. But it wasn't, and it was a great defensive play. Washington, as usual, has great cornerbacks and made a big play. So, again, a fantastic game. Both of them, like you said, the idea that both games went down to the wire, there's no way to complain about who got left out or whatever, especially after Florida State's showing. You can't – no one can feel bad for them.
No, and so I have 2 thoughts on this that I want to bounce off you. But, the one thing about – you're right. The play to the sideline was just maybe that's on Ewers. I don't know who it was on, but that was terrible. That had no chance. The only result is the game's over. That's the only result. If you make
it's a gain for 0 yards and out of bounds.
But even then, I'm not sure he gets out in time because they only had 1 second left after that. The last play, yeah, great defensive play, but every time I watch that replay, there's no way that pass is completed. I mean, even if it is, he's out of bounds. I mean, he threw it late, he threw it flat, and so I kind of put that on him. But I think the play calling for in both games was really suspect at the end. I thought the Milton run up the middle was just dumb. Uh,
I,
let's run right at the best defensive tackles in the country. And
yeah,
now a lot went wrong there. Now, I mean, there was a low snap and he tripped over his lineman, but there was no way that play was working.
no, I agree, and that was they had snap problems. I mean, that cost him the game really. Over the if you add up the different snap problems, and then I tweeted out that center is going to be in the transfer portal and headed to Michigan in the next week, and sure he is in the transfer portal, not headed to Michigan, at least
Right.
not yet, but certainly not going to be at Alabama next year. But yeah, my thought was that the play looked worse than it probably was intended to look.
Right.
But I think I think that the actual call was a run up the middle for Milrow, and if that's the case, that's no good. That's on Tommy Rees because that's not something that was going to work. Now, I mean, could it have gained 3 or 4 yards? Yeah. Was it going to gain 7? No.
Not without somebody missing a tackle I mean, you had to get lucky to make that work. And
Yeah.
that's not the play call you want in that situation. But
Yep.
the other
But that also is a sort of one of the things about Milrow is Milrow's great running the ball. So if you have to defend the run, I mean it opens things up down the field. And Milrow's a great deep ball thrower. The problem is when you're in that compact area, the red zone, Milrow's going to struggle in the red zone unless he figures out some more intermediate stuff. Because as great as his deep ball is, and as much of a threat as he is with the run, if you can't hit, stuff over the middle, if you can't hit accurate stuff over the middle, you're going to have a real big hole in your game, and that's what he's got right now. In that area of the field, there was no deep shot available, and it was too far for him to run it in. It put them in a weird spot.
Yeah. So I have one more thought on this that I want to get your opinion on, because I think on this day the two best teams won, and not just because the score showed it, but both Michigan and Washington should have won by more, if not for their special teams bullshit. I mean,
Dude, special teams is real. I tell people this all the time. Like you can talk about quarterbacks and coaches, but like if you don't have good special teams, it can cost you a game, and it literally. It could have cost Michigan the game. Like the only reason Alabama was in that game was because of because they had bad special teams.
Washington too.
Yeah,
could have cost them the game.
And Alabama has excellent special teams. That kicker is. I mean, Texas does too. Texas has an incredible kicker. Texas was oddly using a kick returner with one hand, which you'd think all the guys at Texas, they got somebody with 2 hands available to return a kick, but yeah, there was a big special teams gap that made those games closer than they should have been. And you know what? Sometimes it's kind of nice to see it so exposed because people don't like to handicap it. People don't like to think it's a big deal.
Right.
Special teams matters. And generally, Michigan's had good special teams all season.
Yeah.
They just had a really bad day. Washington, though, is not a great special teams unit, and if it comes down to it, if anybody were going to have special teams problems in the championship game, I could see it being Washington.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a second. First, before we do that, I want to tell you about my poker exploits last night.
Oh.
I also want to welcome in Flip, Zed, Chucky D, Joel. So we have this little Wednesday night game at the Maple Leaf. And it's 25 cent, 50 cent, but late at night it turns into basically 25 cent, 50 cent, $1, $2, $4 when everybody has money. And so I had my first losing session last week in 6 months. And so last night I decided, you know what?
No wonder you keep going.
I'm not going to drink. I'm just going to go there and play my game. And I fucking destroyed it by the end of it. What happened last week too was part of it wasn't, me, like if I'm playing a cash game, I'll probably play in 6 hours, maybe 7 hands, maybe 8, where I get past the flop. Last week, I got playable hands the first 5 hands. I'm like in every hand, and of course, I have the second best hand every time, and it just took me out of my game. This week, I was like, okay, I'm going to play Freddy Poker. So I totally mashed it. So I played till 2, and a couple of friends I took made some money too. Although one of them I busted, and then he had to rebuy it, but he's okay. We go back to my place, and I drink till 5. So I woke up at 2 this afternoon. This is the first time I've done this in forever because I'm too old for this shit, right? But I pulled an old school Freddie AJ all nighter, and but yeah, I murdered it, and I just like it's just there's times when I decide I'm gonna just play smart and play my game, and not get into anything stupid. And I'm winning with like 4-5 of hearts and 8-4,
Yeah.
all the shit that I win with, right? Yeah, I get aces or kings. Fuck, I have no chance. But anyway, so that's why if I'm a little slow today, I just woke up at 2, although I'm starting to get my second win. So anyway, so let's get to the championship game because I think for me, the keys are Washington's going to be able to score as good as Michigan's defense is. I mean, they've got a great offensive line. Michigan's got the best defensive line, I think, in the country. But Washington, if they can just, I'm not asking them to break even, but be 30% against that line and give Penix time. And I think that was Michael Penix's best game I've ever seen last week.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was one of those. I said this. If this is another like a Vince Young game where if you watch that game, if you were a Heisman voter, you said, "Damn, got the wrong guy." And I think that there's no doubt there had to be people watching that game that voted on the Heisman and didn't vote for Michael Penix going, oh shit, he's way better than I thought he was.
Well, and in their defense, though, I mean, they don't get to see a lot of Washington games. I mean, you and I watch them all, but they do see all the LSU games, as I do as well. But the last month of the season, he wasn't the Michael Penix he was at the beginning of the season, when Washington looked like a goddamn juggernaut.
Yeah.
Now they look like that again, and they did against Oregon. They did in this game. And his receivers, I got to tell you, I think number 1 is better than Marvin Harrison Jr.
Dunze, yeah, I do too.
If I'm drafting in the NFL, but he's got great receivers. I'm a little worried about his running back being hurt, but good offensive line. Offensively, they're going to be able to score against Michigan. The one thing I'll say in Michigan's favor is, besides the fact that Blake Corum is a fucking beast, McCarthy was not healthy the last month of the season. He looked healthy again last week.
Yeah.
And, go ahead.
I think the key in this game is going to be like the difference really in the Michigan-Alabama game was what was it, 6 sacks? I mean,
5 in the first half.
You're not going to touch Penix 6 times. That's the big difference between the Alabama offense and the Washington offense. Is Penix is everything's about timing, everything's about getting the ball out very, very quickly, and that's why I think a lot of NFL scouts were looking at him a lot differently after that last game than they were before it. Like, he was probably thought to be like a 4th round pick at one point, but now it's like, oh shit, maybe this guy is actually like a real dude. You mentioned Dylan Johnson. He's key. They didn't run a lot against Texas. It's hard to run against Texas.
It's hard to run against Michigan.
Hard to run against Michigan. They're probably going to face the 2 best run defenses in the country back-to-back weeks, which is pretty wild. But I don't think you're going to get those negative plays that they got against Alabama.
Right.
This is all about offense versus defense. I mean, this is the best, one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the country against one of the 2 or 3 best offenses in the country. Washington plays close games. 14 wins, 8 of them are 1 possession. Its last 5 games, all 1 possession games. The win over Texas was the largest win they had since they beat Utah on November 11th. So it's like, and they beat them by 7. So it's just they play these close games. Michigan, we see them; they've been up and down. They're either blowing teams out or they're surviving. I generally just look at it as they've been underdogs 3 times this year. They've won all 3 of them outright. This is the biggest underdog they've been all season, 4.5 points. for me, I'm not sure if I'm going to play it yet. I mean, who am I kidding? I'll probably be on it because that's
you'll
just
play something. Yeah.
what am I going to do? Just not bet on the game and watch it
Right.
anyway. But I think if I had to make the bet today, it's Washington. So I like Washington catching the points right there.
Yeah, I go back and forth, but I think that number. I mean, I don't think Washington gets blown out here by any stretch of the mean. But no matter what Michigan does, I don't think Washington gets blown out. And man, they know how to win these games. And it's very much like an NFL team that wins all the close games. They just make the plays. And yeah, I think 4.5 is probably too much. So I'm probably with you on this, but it just depends on the day. I go back and forth. But by Monday, I'll have me.
Like this was one of the worst Alabama offensive lines in years, and Washington won the Joe Moore Award. This was the best offensive line in the country.
Yeah.
You know, they went up against a Texas D line that has 3 NFL guys on it. Didn't give up a single sack. They gave up 11 sacks all season long.
Yeah,
it's just something that they don't do. And I'll be honest. There's one play that really could have changed that Michigan-Alabama game, and it was the first play of the game for Michigan. If that's an interception, if that guy's heel isn't out of bounds before he catches the ball,
yeah.
I mean, do we think Michigan wins that game? I think this would have been so deflating. Like, because we listen, what we've seen Michigan do the last 2 years, go to these bowl games or these playoff games and just get absolutely blown out.
Right.
They were non-competitive against Georgia. They were non-competitive against TCU last year. Like, it had the first play been a McCarthy interception and Alabama had gone and scored, I think there would have been a lot different feeling on that sideline for Michigan. Like, oh, here we go again. And I still think McCarthy might make those mistakes. You're right. McCarthy looked better than he did the last few weeks of the regular season, but I'm not even close to feeling like better about McCarthy than I do about Michael Penix.
No,
I think Michael Penix was he was the best quarterback in the country this year. At the end of the day, it's wild to say that, but he was the guy who he just doesn't make mistakes. And a lot of it is that offensive line is so good. His weapons are so good. I get that. But man, he doesn't put his team in a position to fail. And that's it's not as flashy as like putting up the numbers Jaden Daniels put up. It's not hitting those bombs that Jalen Milroe hits. It's not necessarily sexy, but it's so effective, so efficient. And I just trust him a lot more than I trust JJ McCarthy.
Well, and a couple things on that. It's there was a lot of comparisons to Joe Burrow's game, and if you
Very
look
similar.
at it, yeah, because
Their games are similar. Like
the
way they play.
They put the ball right where their playmakers need to get it, and then their playmakers make plays.
Yep.
And I mean, he was just amazing at that. The other thing too that is easy to forget with the Washington game, the catch white boy receiver made on the last drive. Basically, the Alabama DB mistimes his jump. If he does it, that's a pick.
Yep.
I mean, it's just inches away from being game over. And of course, he makes a catch and then they score. But that was not he threw that into traffic, and the kid just mistimed his jump. And otherwise, that's it.
The other thing I liked about these games is, and what I like about it now, and even though Kalen DeBoer had some really questionable calls, like I said, if they run the ball on third down before they kick the field goal to go up, like if they run the ball there, that last drive for Texas never happens. It doesn't exist in the history of time. It's just
right.
You never had a chance to win. Kalen DeBoer mismanaged that. That said, I think what we saw here were 4 of probably the 6 or 8 best coaches in the country in those games. And we've got, 2 of the 5 or 6 best coaches in the country in the national championship game. And like, you can say what you want about like Jimmys and Joes, but man, in college football, while the Jimmys and Joes matter, no doubt, but it's all about, to me, it's about having these great coaches and great coaches who understand their strengths and have guys around them that can help them get better and call plays or whatever. If you're not a play caller, you put play callers around you. If you are, you focus your assistants on defense, whatever. And I think in this case, we've got 2 really, really good head coaches here, and there's national championship games where it's a mismatch. Let's just be honest. And I think that there's some of these guys who the game has passed them by. Dabo Swinney is a guy you've heard me talk about. As good as Dabo Swinney is as a recruiter, I don't think Dabo Swinney's like an elite X's and O's guy anymore. Jimbo Fisher was never an elite X's and O's guys.
Yeah.
But Jim Harbaugh and Kalen DeBoer, these are two excellent coaches. So one of them, Harbaugh has a way. He's got a stigma to shake, and it feels like he's half shaking it because he couldn't beat Ohio State. He shook that. Couldn't win a playoff game. He shook that. We'll see if he can shake that national championship one. And if Kalen DeBoer wins, we're talking about a star. Like Kalen DeBoer is going to be a star. He's going to be just widely regarded as one of like the best coaches in the country, which he's already been.
Yeah, he should be.
Yeah, it's going to be known. And it's fun. One more thing about Michael Penix before we get off of him. What's crazy about Michael Penix is when he was at Indiana and like when he was good at Indiana, one of the big strengths of him was running the football.
Yeah.
And since his injuries, he's not much of a runner anymore. And I give guys like that a lot of credit. When you lose that aspect of your game and you work much harder at the other stuff, obviously he's gotten to an elite level as a passer. I'm ultra impressed by that. Like if you take a guy who's a dual threat quarterback and make him, I'm not saying Michael Penix is slow now, but Michael Penix isn't going to beat you with his legs like he was a couple years ago. And now he's developed himself into an elite pocket passer. That's very impressive to me.
He can still run for a little bit, but he wasn't RG3, but he was that kind of player before.
Yeah.
He's not that anymore. And so he's made the adjustments. Let's welcome in Joel, Sedboss, B. Hannon. Appreciate all you guys. Half Nielsen. All right. So
it's like if you broke Justin Fields' leg.
Yeah.
And
what would he be?
What would he be? And it ain't much. But like Michael Penix, to have the injuries he had to his legs, to take away that running, or I shouldn't say take it away, to drain that running ability the way that it was drained. And for him to still be what he is, I think is incredible.
And, at some point he might get that back over time. But right now, this is what he is. And he's a terrific pocket passer. But while he doesn't run much anymore, he's really good at eluding the rush.
Yeah.
And extending the play. And with those
11 sacks all year. Yeah. It's crazy.
And with those receivers, they're going to get open. It is crazy. But
think about that. Jalen Milroe got sacked 6 times in one game. And Michael Penix got sacked 11 times in 14 games. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think part of it's a credit to the offensive line, but I think part of it's a credit to him. He gets rid of the ball. He doesn't, and we always talk about this with young quarterbacks in the NFL. They hold the ball too long. He doesn't.
Nope.
He'll get through 4 reads in a second and a half.
Michael Penix reminds me a lot of Tua. And Tua took a little bit of, another guy who kind of got his legs drained a little bit. He's not the runner he was early. But everything is real quick and maybe it's because they're left-handed too, but there's just, there's a lot of similarities with those guys, the way that they want to get the ball out quick. They've got 3 reads in mind. And if none of those 3 reads are open, the ball goes out of bounds. It works. I didn't know how well Tua would work out in the NFL. Turns out Tua was a pretty good player in the NFL. So if Michael Penix can turn into that, and I don't see why he can't, somebody's gonna get a good one, man.
No, I think that's very fair. I do think that the one thing I'll say, they're both accurate passers. I think Penix is even more accurate than Tua.
Might be. And you're going to hear a lot of people say, "Oh, he's old. He's old. He's 23 years old." Yeah. Bryce Young's 20, or CJ Stroud's 22. Bryce Young's 22. Is he old for, he's been in college for 5 years, but he's not an old man by any stretch. This is a 23-year-old kid. I don't think that's going to turn teams off. I think, especially, I don't think when you see Bryce Young and you're like, oh, guys come out as soon as they're eligible to come out. Do you want that? Or do you want 5 years of the guy in their prime, 6 years of the guy in their prime? I think most teams are looking for that. Quarterbacks hit their prime at 27, 28.
Right.
I don't think somebody's gonna be scared off by a 23-year-old.
No, and they shouldn't be. And it's just like, and I think Joe Burrow's a good example of this. Guys that had time to develop in college. I think Bo Nix is a perfect example of this. And I don't want to get into draft talk yet, but I do think if I'm looking for a quarterback, I'll take Bo Nix. I'll definitely take Michael Penix. I love Jaden Daniels. I would take him. But I mean, those are guys that had a chance to develop, and kids don't get that anymore, right? Because you're going to get thrown in if you get drafted by a team high. You're playing right away.
And you either take that step in college or you take it in the NFL if you're going to take that step. And people forget Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow stunk the year before the year before they won the national championship. Like I remember
No,
sitting on the blitz
up until the last 3 games when he got it together. But he was terrible before that.
I remember being on our show and saying, if LSU had a quarterback besides Joe Burrow, they could win the national championship this year. And then, of course, they have like the most historical offensive season ever with Joe Burrow. But there was good reason to believe like Joe Burrow was just a guy. And he took that step that year, and it obviously got him drafted very high. Whereas some other guys, it takes a year or two of being in the league for them to hit that mark. And you know, like Josh Allen didn't really turn a corner until year 3 in the NFL. Tua didn't really turn the corner until last year. It's like different guys develop at different times. And think about this: the guy that might be the league MVP this year is a guy that played a lot of college football and in Brock Purdy, and a guy that a lot of people thought, oh, what's he ever going to be? And you might think, oh, he's an old guy. Dude's got some game, right?
Oh yeah, and
it's all about when you hit that ramp.
And that's the thing. So you look at Burrow, who really needed the time to develop in college. And like I said, it was like probably the last 3 or 4 games of the year before the season where you start saying, oh, maybe this guy can play. And then, of course, he develops. And then he was fine when he got to the NFL because he had all that time to develop. I think Penix is like a guy you can plug in right away. And because he's had the same kind of arc to his career. And sorry, Bo Nix too.
Yeah, the thing about those guys is like Joe Burrow, Michael Penix, their tools aren't as good as some other guys, but you've seen them grow in a way that with some tools guys, you never know if they're going to grow. Like Mitch Trubisky had all the tools in the world. Mitch Trubisky, like if he could have ever figured out football, would have been really good because he could throw the ball to the moon. He was mobile, but he never figured it out. At least with guys like Joe Burrow, Michael Penix, like they've figured it out.
Yeah.
These guys can play. When you take guys on potential, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I mean, again, then there's guys like Kenny Pickett who played a lot of college football and just isn't good enough. Like so, I guess there's lots of different ways to build one, but yeah, I like Michael Penix's chances.
Yeah, and that's the same. And kind of getting to that point, like a guy like Anthony Richardson, and I'll throw Jaden Daniels in there too. Now, Jaden Daniels had success, also a guy who had a lot of experience, but I think he's going to be pretty raw going into the NFL, just like Richardson was. We don't know what they're going to be. They got the talent.
Yeah,
but
it's can they figure it out?
Yeah. All right, let's get to the NFL. All right, let's talk about the Texans first because
all right,
I have to say, if you told me before the season they would go into the last week with the chance to make the playoffs, we would all take it, right? It's like after the garbage we've seen. But watching this team, I'm going to tell you, it'll be a disappointment if they don't win. The way C.J. Stroud's played, and then last week getting Will Anderson back, I think was huge because he had the back-to-back sacks, and people are like, you know how people are with defensive ends. If they don't have 20 sacks, then they're a bad pick. But the truth is, this guy is a disruptor every single play. In the run game, he's a better Jadeveon Clowney, and Clowney was pretty good early at that. But having him back and having C.J. Stroud, I really will be disappointed if this team doesn't go into Indy and win. Now, from a betting perspective, I'm taking Indy. But I think they've had a great year. and there's a lot to look forward to. But let's look forward to this year. Go get the win. Go get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think this game for me boils down to I think these two teams are very even
Yeah.
outside of quarterback. And I think the Texans just have a massive edge with a healthy CJ Stroud. Minshew, if you look at quarterbacks who have taken at least 50% of the snaps, Minshew is 23rd on PFF and Stroud is 13th. The only players worse than Gardner Minshew, get ready for this list, Fred.
All right, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Zach Wilson, Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Desmond Ritter. That's the list of guys that have been worse this season per PFF than Gardner Minshew. And I think the big key for the Texans here is, and I guess maybe the key for the Colts too, the Texans since week 10, their defense has changed. And I worry a little about no Grenard this week. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
That is a big blow. But the Texans have been 9th in opponent success rate, 12th in opponent EPA per play since week 10. The Colts are 21st and 19 in those same weeks. And the Colts have only played one offense in the top half of the league down that stretch, and that was the Bengals. So it's like, is that really a top offense?
Yeah.
The Texans, I think the Texans are the best team in this division with a healthy CJ Stroud. Like they should win this game. Listen, we know that they've had a history of struggles at Indy over their franchise lifetime, but if there's a time to get up there and get a win because you're the better team, this is it. What I will say about Indy is, while they're very lucky, I think they are very well coached. I think they hired the right guy.
Oh God, yeah.
And it's that's one thing I've got to give them credit for. And I think around the, like, if you said who's got the top to bottom best coaching in football, I think it's the AFC South. Like, I don't think there's a dud in that group of AFC South coaches. And then, I mean, when you look at like the NFC South, I don't know if there's a good one. So it really is. It's gonna be a good division eventually. If these quarterbacks all work out,
it's gonna be fun.
If Anthony Richardson works out, if Will Levis works out, if Trevor, it's sad to say, if Trevor Lawrence works out, and if CJ Stroud works out, like that's the AFC South is going to be really good because there's some good quarterbacks and potential, or at least good potential quarterbacks and some really good head coaches there.
Well, Will Levis isn't going to work out because he's sexy Mitch Trubisky. He looks the part, but he's not a football player.
Might be. He might be.
But the other three, I mean, I don't know about Richardson yet. I love him. I love his talent. And, Trevor Lawrence you have to ride with. And I think we've already seen that CJ's a player. So
the problem is we see a lot of guys for 1 year,
right,
and then guys get film on them. Like, I want to see 2 years of CJ Stroud before I say, yep, he's got it. Because, God, remember Mac Jones year one looked like the best quarterback in his class. Now he looks like he doesn't belong in the league.
No, and that's always a concern because, I mean, you can have one good year. I just don't see it with him because he adjusts to everything.
I agree.
And the more I watch this kid, I'm like, wow. I mean, and we talked about this. I didn't want him. I wanted Bryce Young. But when they drafted him, I'm like, oh, thank God it's not Will Levis. And the more I watch this kid, he's just a good kid on top of being a good football player. And he adjusts and he learns. And, there were a couple plays he made early in the season that I'm like, what the hell are you doing that he doesn't do anymore? So it's just so many little things with him. I'm not worried about the next year thing because I think they've already tried to adjust to him.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really worked.
It's funny. You wanted Bryce Young and not Will Levis. I said, I don't know that there's a top 10 quarterback in this class. Turns out we were both wrong. So good news for the Texans. We were both wrong.
But have we not, between you and me, have we not said that every year except for Trevor Lawrence?
More often than not. Yeah. There's not a lot of guys I believe in. So yes, but again, this was a year I was like, everybody's like the idea that people were trading up to get Bryce Young, just mind-boggling to me. Just I didn't think I thought, if I was taking a quarterback, I'd start thinking about it around 12 this last season. And turns out, I mean, CJ Stroud's obviously like he's a game changer.
But you always have to overbuy to get a quarterback. And and like everybody was like, oh, let's wait till next year when we can get Caleb.
The Texans couldn't wait. They couldn't wait.
And by the way, if you'd waited for Caleb this year, even if you had the number one pick, I don't know that that's a good pick anymore. I mean, I think we saw some mental flaws with him that really concerned me in the NFL. I mean, I'm not saying Ryan Leaf on him, but there's some issues there. And I like Drake May and I like Jaden Daniels. I like these guys. I don't know if I'm gonna hitch my saddle to Caleb Williams.
I think the Bears are in a really interesting spot
Oh, it's a
because
tricky spot, yeah.
I don't. It's who do you believe in more, Justin Fields or Caleb Williams or Drake May? I'm not really sure. Obviously they're gonna trade Justin Fields or they're gonna trade that pick, but it's a really fascinating decision. And I'll say this: if the Bears can get, similar to what they got last year, I'd trade that pick again. Like if you can get multiple firsts again, then you do it. But I don't know. Justin Fields is like one of the hardest players in the league to figure out. Like you can see sometimes, like man, this kid can play, and then there's times where it's like, what the hell? This guy can never be a top tier guy. So the Bears are in an interesting spot with that pick.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the most intriguing things because if they do trade down, because somebody will trade up and take Caleb Williams and probably get a disaster. But like let's say you add a Marvin Harrison. Let's say you add, they probably need another edge rusher. Everybody does. Let's say you make those moves and keep Justin Fields. I mean, because they feel close to me. The Bears feel close. It's just, do you think Justin Fields could just take a little step up as a passer? Because I think the rest is there. There's still some bad decision making, but I don't know if he's the guy. That's the problem. I think he could be the guy, but I don't think he is right now. So what do you do?
And when you've got guys like that, I mean, like Lamar has obviously grown in his career as a passer, but the Ravens organizationally are so good at building around certain players.
Yeah.
And do you trust the Bears to be able to do that properly? I don't know if I do. Like, I don't know if the Bears' offensive line is still not very good. The Bears still have a lot of holes on defense. Like, you have to build your team a certain way if you're going to have a quarterback like that. Like, if you've got a prototype, if you've got a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen, you can build differently. If you're relying on a quarterback that has limitations as a thrower, you have to build your team differently. And it's I don't know if I trust the Chicago Bears organizationally to do that.
I don't, but I mean, you mentioned Justin Herbert. Let's have this conversation because you and I have been high on this guy for a long time. Were we wrong? Is he just not that? Is he just like a poor man's Kirk Cousins?
I don't think that. I think Justin Herbert is. I mean, I think he's one of the most talented guys in the league. I don't think there's 5 quarterbacks that I'd take before him if I were schoolyard picking. But I think that the Chargers situation is worse than anybody thought. Brandon Staley's worse than anybody thought.
Right.
They're built on a bunch of wide receivers that can't seem to stay healthy.
And maybe I'll tell you what, I think those receivers are a little bit overrated. All of them. I think they're good. But they're not like all pro type or even pro types.
I think when Keenan Allen's been healthy, he's been a game changer, but he's just never healthy. And I think the Quentin Johnston miss is going to really haunt them because they were trying to draft the next guy in that line, and he's just not good. He's not even. It's not like he's like almost unplayable. Like that's how bad he is. So, and the Chargers have cap issues it's going to come knocking on the door. Like, hey, man, they're like the Saints. You can kick the can down the road for so long with your salary cap, but eventually it catches up to you. And it's going to catch up to the Chargers now, especially now that they're paying a quarterback big money.
No, I've always said the salary cap can be like payday loans, right? You can get the money right now, but then you're paying 5 times that the next year. And
it's like paying off a credit card with another credit card.
Right. And the thing about Keenan Allen, I think he's Nico Collins. I think he's just a good receiver that a really good quarterback makes look better. And I mean, like you look at Nico Collins' season, and you're like, holy shit, this guy can play. He missed 2 games, and he's over 1,000 yards. But you don't look at him during the course of a game and say, wow, this guy's out there. Like Stephon Diggs scores touchdowns because he makes plays. CeeDee Lamb is like that now. They make plays after the catch. It just seems like he's a guy who makes a catch, gets a few yards, and will make the catch and do well, but he's not the guy who's changing the game.
Yeah, and that's probably fair. And it's also like, I mean, when a guy is hardly ever available, it's really hard to judge what he can be. Like his best year was the 2020 year when he ended up not getting to 1,000 yards because he missed the last couple games of the season, and then this season was on pace for another big year and got hurt. I don't know if he got hurt or he realized that, like, hey, we're not going anywhere. There's no point in me being out here anymore.
Right.
But it's frustrating and listen, now the dude is, I don't know exactly how old he is. He's in his 30s.
Yeah.
It's not going to get better. He's not going to get healthier, going forward. So it's something that the Chargers really have to think about. Like, what's the long term with him? And again, when you look at Quentin Johnston, that was your hope. It's like you've got a guy like Keenan Allen who's a possession receiver, and like they were looking for that deep threat, the speed guy, the burner. You just missed. He's just like it's great to be fast, but if you can't catch the ball, it doesn't matter.
No, and I loved him up until about the last 4 games of last season when they started playing really good defenses. Suddenly he wasn't the explosive guy that he'd been all year. And so that was my only concern, but I liked him when he drafted him, and that's been a bust. But anyway, all right, so let's get some of the other games this week and go through them. I'll tell you what, maybe one of my favorite plays, and you can tell me I'm wrong. Baltimore's going to rest everybody. I mean, Pittsburgh still has a shot, and ordinarily I'd say Pittsburgh has no chance against Baltimore, but I freaking love the Steelers in this spot because Baltimore doesn't give a shit. They're there. They're not going to play anybody. If Lamar Jackson plays, it's going to be 2 series, and I think the Steelers have all the motivation here. This is just like a bowl game for me. It's like, who has the motivation?
You and I will be head to head on this one then. If the Ravens were healthy, or if the Ravens were playing everyone, like if the Ravens needed this game the way the Steelers need it, the Ravens would be more than a 10-point favorite.
Oh, I agree. 100%. But they aren't. I mean, that's not the reality.
To me, this game should probably be about a pick 'em. I think Tyler Huntley's a very serviceable, experienced backup. In fact, he's probably better than the Steelers quarterback, Mason Rudolph. And the Ravens are deep. And if you're saying the Ravens are going to treat this like a preseason game, that should be worrisome because who's the best preseason team in the history of time? It's the Baltimore Ravens under John Harbaugh. And the underdogs in this Harbaugh-Tomlin matchups, 23-5 ATS, 82%. They are 19-2 with a spread of more than a field goal. And listen, I think the Ravens would love to knock the Steelers out of the playoffs. In 2019, they were in this exact position. The Steelers were 8-7, coming into Baltimore, needed to win. The Ravens were the 1 seed. They were resting Lamar. The Steelers were 2-point favorites, and it was an RG3 start, and the Ravens blew them out of the water with RG3 playing quarterback. I think if this game were a pick, I'd say I that makes sense to me. The Steelers laying over a field goal doesn't make sense to me. Like that doesn't jive for me.
It's a little much, but I just and I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the final odds, because I think 3 is the number, right? I think Pittsburgh -3. I'm all over it. Outside of that, I don't know. But as far as just winning the game, I think the Steelers are in a good spot here. I do, and I love the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens have made both of us a lot of money all fucking year.
The Ravens are in an interesting spot because if I said name the teams in the AFC with the best chance to beat the Ravens in the playoffs, what order would you go?
Bills.
Okay.
Maybe Chiefs. That's as far as I go.
But the first team you said is the Bills. If the Ravens lose this game to Pittsburgh, it makes Buffalo's path a lot more difficult. And there's a chance that they could keep Buffalo out of the playoffs by losing this game.
Yeah.
And so for like long game shit, I could see that happening. But I also know, man, Ravens fans, when Pittsburgh comes to town, they want to see if you've got a chance to knock Pittsburgh out of the playoffs, Ravens fans want to see that shit.
Well, but you agree with me, right? I think the Bills have the best chance.
I do. I think so. And that's why I'm saying, like, if the Ravens were playing the long game, the meta game, it makes sense to lose this one and make it where the Buffalo game is a must win for them.
Yeah, well, but you and I think about this shit. I'm not sure that I'm not even
John Harbaugh's got to be smarter than me. I would hope.
Well, I mean, maybe in football, but not at this kind of shit, because this is next level thinking. It's like we talk about with poker, right? Like you and I try to get to level 10 on poker. We're trying to think, 10 levels down while everybody else is thinking 1, 2, 3, and that's the same kind of thinking you're doing here. I'm not sure even Jeff Harbaugh would come up with this. So, sorry, that's a callback to the old Blitz days. I apologize.
That's the third brother. He's the Cooper of the Cooper Manning of the Harbaugh family.
All right, so let's get some other games. The Browns at Cincinnati. I think, okay, I'm going to say this, and maybe you'll disagree, but other than the Bills, I think the Browns might be the team in the AFC if they get serviceable quarterback play out of Flacco, which they're getting, because their defense is so fucking good.
I think you're absolutely right. And I like the Browns this week. I was the only one on the pod that liked the Browns. Everybody pushed the button on me. They're all against me at +7.
I love it. I'm with you.
Like, so they're like, Jeff Driscoll's playing quarterback. I was like, has it mattered who's played quarterback for the Browns this year? It hasn't mattered one single bit. The Browns beat the San Francisco 49ers with PJ Walker playing quarterback. And I get, like, Amari Cooper's not going to play. They're going to rest guys. I get it. But are T. Higgins isn't going to play? Are the Bengals going to be all out? Or is Jamar Chase going to keep going out there on his, his pushing his body when he doesn't need to?
What's the point for him to even be out there?
The total in this game is 37.5 points. You're giving me 7 points with a way better defense. I just can't pass on it. Like I said, the Browns are 10-6 against the spread this season, including that win as a 9.5-point dog against the Niners with PJ frickin' Walker. These guys can compete with anyone, and the Bengals have been non-competitive in division. They're 0-5 in division. The margin is over negative 13 points per game. They've been blown out in these division games.
Well, and I'll throw this out there. You know who's probably been the worst quarterback for the Browns this year? Deshaun.
Joe Burrow. Deshaun. I thought you said for the Browns.
No, for the Browns.
Well, so Deshaun went 4-1 in his 5 starts,
and he never played well.
You're right. I still think. I mean, PJ Walker's the worst. I mean, PJ Walker he's terrible. But even PJ Walker went 2-1. That's the thing about these Browns. That it was Deshaun was 4-1, Flacco's 4-1, PJ Walker's 2-1, and DTR was 1-1. It's like everybody's okay. None of these guys are. Well, I mean, they're not that they're okay, but the team is good enough that it doesn't really matter what you. It's almost like the Tampa Bay Bucks when they won the Super Bowl. Their defense was so legit. Doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. You can figure it out.
Right. I mean, and they could win with Brad Johnson, but and that's the thing with these guys.
Yeah, not the Brady Bucks. Those guys had a pretty good quarterback.
Well, yeah, but this defense, it's not quite Ravens defense, but man, are they good. And all you have to do is not fuck up if you're the quarterback.
Well, I think the Browns defense this season is as good as the Ravens defense this season. But if you're talking about the year the Ravens won the Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer playing quarterback, it's no.
And Ray Lewis and all those guys.
Yeah, that was a different beast.
It's not on that level, but it's pretty good. I mean, and you know what? That's another team that you and I have both been riding all year and making money off of. So all right, so Minnesota at Detroit. Detroit with the tough loss on. I want your thoughts on that Detroit-Dallas game, but what do you think about this one?
I'm torn on it. I feel like there's people saying, well, he told him the day before. And I'm like, is it the referee's job to like go by what you told him the day before or go by what you told them on the field?
Right.
And whatever happened, again, I don't think we'll ever know who said what, to the ref directly. But after it got said, the refs announced number 70 is reporting as eligible,
Right.
and then they threw it to number 68. If I'm on that Lions offense and if I'm number 70, and I would be like, hey, no, I'm not the one who reported eligible. You've got the wrong name. Like but then again, is it the player's job to correct the referees? I'm
No.
not sure, but it's an unfortunate thing. That said, when Dan Campbell says we were intentionally trying to confuse the Cowboys, you got to be careful about that
Right.
because
Because
you
then you
intentionally
confuse the
confuse the
refs.
referees. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, and it's probably cost the Lions, a couple or at least one home playoff game, which I think is pretty important,
Right.
and really gave the Cowboys probably 2 home games, which is super important to them. But I think I think Detroit's in a weird situation. Like they're not going to be the 2 seed. Like it's
Right.
highly unlikely. They need the Eagles and Cowboys to lose. So I don't know how much time we see for Lions starters. I liked the Vikings in the first matchup between these two teams a couple
I
weeks
did too.
ago,
I did too.
and Nick Mullins threw 4 picks in a
Yeah.
game where other than Nick Mullins throwing 4 picks, they were statistically even.
Other than that,
So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
that one little fact, yeah.
yeah. But if Nick Mullins only throws 3 picks, the Vikings probably win that game. I don't know. It's tough. I think that the Vikings are. I think they may be tired. Like they've been trying to keep it in with this defense, but quarterback situation has just gotten so dire that it's hard to see them
Yeah.
winning.
After a while, you run out of juice on that. But to get back to that, I get what you're saying about that. None of us were on the field, so we don't know, right?
Yep.
So all we can do is just try to formulate opinions based on bullshit because we have no knowledge of it. But it's not like you can only have one guy report eligible. So I don't know what happened. But obviously, if you're trying to confuse somebody and you confuse the refs, maybe you overdid it. That's and it shouldn't have come down to that. If you play, we always say this. It might come down to the last play in the NFL because it always does. But if you play better, it doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't come down to you having to get a 2-point conversion to win the game.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna give you this one, and then I'm gonna run to the little boys' room real quick while you're doing it, because I'm an old man. This is hard for me. Jacksonville and Tennessee, interesting game because if Jacksonville loses, Houston and Indy have a path to win the division.
Yeah, this is perfect because this is one of my favorite plays of the week. I love Tennessee here.
I'm glad to hear that because I do too.
Yeah. Listen, the Titans have a lot of shit going wrong for them right now, but this is the kind of game where I like having Mike Vrabel as a coach. You know that Vrabel, first of all, besides Mike Tomlin, is the best underdog coach in the league. And he's not going to roll over and quit. Like he had a quote where he said, when they were asking him about playing for draft position and things like that, and Mike Vrabel said, the worst thing you can do as an organization is lose football games. It doesn't matter when. If there's ever a time in your franchise that you think losing is the answer, you're not built for the NFL. And I like that mindset, at least I like betting on that mindset. I don't always agree with it. I think there's times where it'd be better to have the better draft pick if you can't make the playoffs, but it makes me feel good about backing Vrabel here as a dog. I think we're still not sure who's going to play quarterback for the Titans. I don't really think it matters that much. I think at this point, Levis and Tannehill are about the same. But if it's Tannehill, it's probably Tannehill's last game with the Titans. It's probably Derrick Henry's last game with the Titans. I think they're going to be motivated. I think that the Titans are so much better at home. The Titans' scoring margin on the season is -70. Their scoring margin at home is +30. So that means they are -100 on the road and +30 at home. They're just way different team at home. And then with Lawrence status in question, Zay Jones status in question, and I think you go back to last year when the Jags knocked the Titans out of the playoffs last year. They're going to be itching to return the favor, and I'm not going to let the Jags blowing out the Panthers last week distract from the fact that the Jags have looked like a bottom feeder in the second half of the season. This is like the Titans last year when they collapsed down the stretch and the Jags were able to knock them out of the playoffs. It feels very similar.
Yeah.
The Jags are collapsing down the stretch.
Well, I don't want to say they look like bottom feeders, but they look like very average to slightly below average team. And you know how that works in the NFL.
Yep.
It's like, and I think throw out the Titans game last week because but the one thing that I did like, they kept trying to compete. They were getting their ass kicked, but they didn't quit.
Yep.
And if they don't quit and Ryan Tannehill's playing quarterback, I think they have a chance here. So
that's the Vrabel mindset. He's not going to let him quit. That's why I like backing the dog here.
Yeah, okay. So I'm with you 100%. I didn't hear the whole thing, but I'm sure I agree with all of it. Okay.
Did you wash your hands?
Of course I did.
Okay, good.
Come on, are we really going to do this again?
Just like to make sure.
Yeah, of course
I don't want to pass disease.
Well, you're in fucking Las Vegas. You're not.
I know, but you never know.
Even if I get fucking chlamydia off the toilet, you're not getting it. You're fine.
I don't know how the internet works.
Well, me either. Okay, so Jets at New England. I gotta admit, I have no interest in this.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest in it either. Although, what I will say is, the Patriots seem to be playing really hard right now. They're 3-0-1 ATS in the last 4, 2 outright wins. And the Patriots have won 15 straight in this matchup, 23 of the last 25. I mean, you talk about Belichick absolutely owning a team.
Yeah.
It's this. That said, whoever's got a plus by their name, I think it's a good teaser leg.
Right.
Because, how many points are going to be scored in this game? So Jets right now, I'd tease them over 7 if you can. But gun to my head, I think New England wins the game because New England always beats the Jets.
Yeah, and New England played their asses off last week against the Bills. It wasn't good enough, but
that's another one. If they don't throw 3 interceptions, like if Bailey Zappi doesn't just give the ball away 3 times, then it's a different game.
All right, so Atlanta at New Orleans.
Yeah, this is a fascinating game, but I can only back the Falcons here as long as the number's at 3. We talked about this last week with New Orleans when I liked New Orleans on the road at Tampa.
Yeah.
I said all these teams are the same. New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa, they're all basically power rated equally for me. So if you're going to give me a full field goal, that's the only way I'm going to look. And the Dogs covered 4 of the last 5 in this matchup. It also happens that Atlanta's been a dog every time. So Atlanta's covered 4 of the last 5. I backed Atlanta last week. They made me look stupid, so I'm not in a big rush to bet them here. But Atlanta's the only way I'd look. Kamara hasn't practiced. That's worrisome if you're the Saints. But
right.
Yeah, it's dog or pass for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Tampa at Carolina. Carolina's dead, and obviously all Tampa has to do is win the game to win the division.
Yeah, so the Bucs have been field goal favorites now 3 times this season. They are 0-2-1 ATS. Baker Mayfield in his career as a favorite, 13-26.
Yeah.
The Panthers stink, but like the Bucs are like, let's say if you were stack ranking the league, where could the Bucs possibly be? Like, what's the highest they could be? Like
17, 18, maybe.
Should a team that's in the let's just say 16, let's say middle of the pack.
Right.
If you're an average team, you can't lay 4.5 points on the road.
Yeah.
You can't.
To anybody, even the worst team in the league.
And Carolina, they're much better at home than on. I mean, they freaking beat the Texans at home.
Yeah.
And think about this: the Panthers were 2.5 point dogs at home against Atlanta. Is Tampa are they that much better than Atlanta to go up to 4.5? The Packers were minus 3.5 at Carolina. Are the Bucs better than the Packers? I don't believe
they're the same team, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So I think, and by the way, the Bucs covered both of those games.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, the Panthers covered both of those games. So I think I don't think the Bucs are very good. I don't want to back them laying points like that on the road. I think it's crazy. So again, it's not fun. Like putting money down and saying, I think the Carolina Panthers can compete this week. It sucks, but that's the only way I could look.
No, that's a hold your nose bet, right?
Yep.
We've talked about that for years, and we've done a lot of those and won with them. So yeah, Chicago at Green Bay, and like Green Bay's in the playoffs right now. This team is not any good.
No, their defense is awful.
I mean,
but
they're terrible.
But Jordan Love, since week 12, has been the highest rated passer in the league. Jordan Love's figured it out, and this goes kind of back to the like we were talking about the Patriots Jets. The Packers have won 9 straight in this series and covered every single time.
Easily.
They have won 24 of the last 27 games, 21-6 ATS. And the Bears away from home, yuck. They've won two games on the road, and both of those wins, they were +2 in turnovers. So they need a lot of help to get to compete on the road. I think the Packers beat the Bears. It's just what the Packers do. I think the Bears defense has gotten a lot of love in the second half of this season, and they're like, well, they turned a corner. For me, I look at their schedule. That's what tells me that's why the Bears defense looks a lot better. Their schedule is shit. Besides Jared Goff, who they played outside, and we know what Jared Goff is outside in weather. They've been playing like the dregs of the NFL quarterbacks. I think Jordan Love has some success here, and just it's one of those things. Like I'm just not going to bet on this. I'm not going to bet I'm not going to bet on the Bears to beat the Packers because they never beat the Packers.
And I hate betting on the Packers, but if that's the only way to go, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you're going to play this, you have to do that.
If you bet the Bears, you're like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. Like you're just not tired of falling on your ass.
Denver and Las Vegas. Boy, what a great call last week when you talked about Jarrett Stidham. I backed you. We both hammered Denver. But what do you think about this week?
Yeah, I don't know who's motivated. The Raiders are saying all the right things. The Raiders want Pierce to be the head coach. I don't know. I don't know how much better they are with him than they were with McDaniels. So they've won 4 games with Pierce, but 3 of those have been against Tommy DeVito, Zach Wilson, and or against Easton Stick. So it's like, okay, it's nice. You're winning games, but are you really?
Don't you disrespect DeVito and Stick? My God, those guys are demigods. Come on.
But I will say Devontae Adams came out and said we want to keep Pierce as the head coach. We believe in him. We believe in his philosophies. So I think they're fighting for him. But I also think, Sean Payton's not the type to roll over and die. I think Sean Payton is going to get the best out of Jarrett Stidham. This game's a pass for me. I guess a lean to the Raiders if you're getting less than 3, or if you're giving less than 3.
Okay, so Philadelphia at New York. Philadelphia has we talked about this weeks ago that they didn't look like the same team. New York is a tough out. They really do fight hard. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles. What do you see here?
This is my best bet on the pod is on the Giants.
Thank you, because I'm in love with that play.
It's a twofold bet. So one, the Eagles are an absolute mess. Like on the field, apparently in the locker room, A.J. Brown's unhappy. Players are complaining about how they're being used. In the first 7 weeks of the season, the Eagles outgained their opponents by just under 100 yards a game. They won the yardage in 6 of the first 7 games.
Right.
Since then, they've only won the yardage battle twice, and it's negative 68 yards per game is the margin. They've now lost 4 of 5. It could easily be 5 of 5 if the Giants had started Taylor instead of DeVito in that game.
Yeah.
So they're just a mess on the field. But the other reason to like the Giants is the Eagles don't have much reason to play their starters. Like,
right.
You can talk about
nothing to gain here.
You can say, well, they can win the division if the Cowboys lose. The Cowboys are 13 and 14-point favorites. Like, what's more important, or what do you think your better odds are? Preparing yourself for next week, getting healthy enough where you can maybe beat a team like the Arizona freaking Cardinals.
Right.
You're gonna have to play these guys in the playoffs. We talked all season long about wear and tear on Jalen Hurts, and the defense has just fallen into the shitter because they're all out of gas.
Yeah.
So to me, I would use this opportunity to get my starter some extra rest. I think the Eagles are an average team, and again, this goes back to: do I lay 5 points on the road with an average team? No, particularly one that likely does some load management. So I like the Giants here +5.
See, I'm going to give you some credit because you said this, weeks ago, that the Eagles were a lot like last year's Steelers, or
Yes,
right?
they're incredibly
winning
lucky.
games and they're lucky, they're luck boxes, and it just happens.
The difference was the Eagles won, they were in the Super Bowl last year, so
Right.
people were inclined to believe in what they were doing. But the truth was, like, this is not the same team that was in the Super Bowl last year. Like, it's not even close. Their defense is it's bad.
All right, Seattle and Arizona, Arizona's been good for me the last few weeks on playing them. They haven't quit. They're well coached. Kyler's back. Seattle's one of those teams. They're like the Texans. They can beat anybody on their best day. They can lose to anybody on their worst day. And they're so good at home that I'm always going to play them at home. But I hate to bet Arizona coming off a cover and a win. But I kind of feel like the Cardinals are the play here. Tell me I'm wrong.
So the Cardinals started out 1-8. Since Kyler came back, they're 3-4 straight up, 4-3 ATS. So obviously it's a huge improvement. Seattle's they're going in the opposite direction. They've lost 5 of 7 after they started out 6-3.
Yeah.
I bet Arizona at 3. The problem with betting them at 2.5 is Seattle was -2.5 at Tennessee 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Like, or Tennessee and Arizona equal teams. That's hard for me to get to.
Right.
I will say Arizona, the over has hit in every Arizona home game this season. So if you and Seattle's defense is just a disaster. Arizona's defense has been bad all year.
Right.
So if anything, I'm going to look at the total in this game. I think there's a lot of points scored.
All right. Kansas City at our fucked up Chargers, who none of us can bat. But Kansas City is. I think the one thing with KC, they have a better defense this year, and Pat Mahomes is still Pat Mahomes, but his receivers are fucking awful. And it's not just they drop passes; they run bad routes. They shouldn't even. I'm not sure there's one of them that should be in the NFL. And that way, everybody brackets Travis Kelce, and he gets triple coverage. And it's really been hard. Now, Pacheco's been good for them, so they're going to have to run the ball. But
Pacheco's not playing.
Yeah, he's not playing this week. But I'm just saying, for them to win,
yeah,
that's what they're going to have to do when they get to the playoffs. I just don't think this is a very good Chiefs team.
No, I don't either. That said, I'm not backing the Chargers here either. This was the game that I have like the least interest in betting. I mean, obviously the Chiefs. There's no Patrick Mahomes, no Travis Kelce, no Isaiah Pacheco. So I don't know how they score.
Yeah, maybe under on this, right?
Yeah, and it's painful under, but
we've been backing on Chargers all year and getting our ass kicked. So
yeah.
All right, Rams at San Fran. San Fran has nothing to play for. The Rams have everything to play for.
Not really. The Rams are locked. They're basically locked into the playoffs. They don't have that much to play for. Matt Stafford's not playing.
Okay. So what do we do here?
I think if anything, I look at the 49ers in the first half. Shanahan has said before the year they had a bye that they kind of regret resting their guys the week before the bye because it was 2 weeks. It knocked them out of their rhythm. So I think that Purdy's not going to play, but I think you're going to see a lot of other starters play at least a half. So, and this is, I always talk about the circle of life in the NFC West, and 49ers own the Rams. The Rams haven't won a regular season game since 2018, 9 straight that the Niners have won. So I think that you're going to see the starters play early for San Francisco and then sit late. You can get San Francisco -3, -2.5 in the first half. That's the way I would look. Just because I think when you take all the key chess pieces off the board, when you take McCaffrey, Purdy, Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford, you take those pieces off the board, and it's a coaching battle. We've seen historically that Kyle Shanahan just he's got McVay's number. So I like that early. I like the Niners early.
Just like McVay has Pete Carroll's number. But
Exactly. It's the circle of life.
Yeah. All right. So we got 2 minutes left. Seattle or Dallas and Washington. Um, Cowboys win this. They win the division. I know they lost. They lost to Washington last year. What are your thoughts?
Again, Dallas early. I think Dallas wants to jump out to a
Yeah.
lead and then cruise. But I do think the Commanders are going to keep chucking it. They're going to try to score some points. And I don't trust Dallas on the road laying a big number. So I like Dallas early, but I'm not playing them.
And then finally, Buffalo and Miami. I know both of us love Buffalo. I just don't think Miami can beat a team that's on their level. I mean, Dallas was a good win, but they're the same fucking team, right? They beat up on cripples and they lose to good teams. Buffalo's better than Miami.
Yeah, I agree. A couple weeks ago, I played Buffalo to win the AFC East plus 210. So I'm not going to be laying 3 here.
Ooh, I like that.
But I do think that the market seems to expect a shootout, and that's not what these teams have been lately.
No, either one of them.
The Dolphins they're offensively, they're not at full strength. They're still banged up on the offensive line. There's no Jalen Waddle. Hill, A-Chain, Mostert, all banged up. Tua was banged up last week.
Yep.
And Josh Allen, there's something going on with him right now. Like that was last week was the worst game he's played since that wind game in New England where Mac Jones only threw 3 passes. So I think this is an under. I played under 50. I think that's my best angle on this. I do think Miami being a 3-point home dog is a little much. So if I had to play a side, it's probably Buffalo, but I'm riding with Buffalo to win the division. So that's my hope as well, that Buffalo wins the division.
Yeah, I love that underplay. All right, guys, we got to wrap it up because it's about to cut us off. AJ, great job, man. I love you, brother. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you soon about some other stuff. But such a pleasure. Your fucking gambling game has gone next level since you've been at pregame.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, man.
All right, guys. That's gonna wrap it up. I gotta tell you, every time AJ's on, it's like I have so much fun doing this. I mean, I don't care about how much money we make or whatever. It's just hanging out with AJ is so fucking cool. And I love you guys for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Until Monday, stay sportsy, Gulf Coast badasses.